Welcome to a new Zeta report here on USA Emergency Broadcasting Network. We are live first Mondays of every month. I'd like to welcome back to the show. My name's Andre, by the way. I'd like to welcome back to the show Nancy from Zeta Talk. Nancy, are you there?
I sure am. Looking forward to it. We have a fun hour. You know, it's serious, but it's fun. What it's all about is that so often in movies, you know, you see a scene, you see something depicted. It's not part of the main theme. It's, you know, you're watching the love affair or the rescue or the big fight or whatever, you know, but on the side they're demonstrating something that is a survival technique. You know, and I want to bring that. I have about 20 different examples of movies that are fun to watch. So the next time that you watch these movies, look for that, you know, and notice that is teaching you and demonstrating survival techniques. But before we get into this, and if there's a little time left at the end of the hour, Andre and I have been, you know, hashing through all the politics. There's the plague is reemerged in Africa. What's that all about? You know,
Right.
Saudis had a big coup, you know, attempt that was foiled, or maybe it succeeded, or depends on whose side you're looking at. But anyway, we can get into all of that kind of stuff later if there's time at the end of the hour. So first, let me read the disclaimer. As always, in partnership with USA EBN, Zeta Talk and the Zeta Report will be discussing the challenges of living on a planet beset with change, rising seas, increasing earthquakes and volcanic activity, weather gone wild, and the worry of what to do next in a worst-case scenario. We will also inject Zeta Talk prophecy on what is coming next and advice on readiness plans and safe locations. Whenever Zeta Talk is quoted, please remember that prophecy is not fact. It is opinion. It only becomes fact when it happens. The Zetas are remarkably accurate but have been wrong on occasion. Bear that in mind. For more information on this subject, please visit zetatalk.com or the Zeta Report on YouTube. Questions from the chat and issues raised in the chat will be addressed toward the end of the hour after the main feature has been presented. What will the new Earth be like? From movies, there are examples and subtle influences. Unlike the TV series Naked and Afraid or Survivor, these movie suggestions are not the focus of the movie, not the theme, but the subconscious has seen and heard the message. The Hobbit houses are well known due to the Lord of the Rings movie series. Bermed with earth, an inexpensive material which insulates for both heat and cold, and the rounded shape of the Hobbit homes makes that quake-proof. Peace of Mind in Earthquake Country details what actually goes with the roll and sway, what snaps and drops. Wooden houses are more flexible than concrete or stucco, and the circle or oval is known to be the strongest architectural shape. Well, look at what you've packed into the Hobbit homes. You know, they have that rounded doorway, the rounded shape of the whole living room or whatever, and they're also taking advantage of berming. Earth insulates against the cold outside, keeps the heat in, and vice versa, keeps the cold out. Or I should say, if it's hot outside, it keeps it cool in there. So, when you look at the Hobbit houses, other than to say, oh, isn't that cozy and cute, think of the practicality. These things have and could be built. Having your own garden and growing food such as winter squash or pumpkin or potatoes or green cabbage or carrots that will last the winter can tide you through the coming food shortages and position you for survival after the coming pole shift. The hobbits were enthusiastic about all those foods. For first breakfast, second breakfast, then elevensies, and all that before lunch. I joke because they seem to have an endless appetite, you know. Well, has he never heard of second breakfast? Well, what about elevensies, you know? They just ate all the time. And they would carry around these big, beautiful pumpkins or whatever and have these patches, and they were clearly saying, you know, this is our main crop,
Right.
and they loved them. They would bring them out in the bar, roast them, cut them up, roast them, pass it out, whatever. This is such a good food, these kind of winter squash. They're full of vitamin A, calories, etc., and they keep beautifully. You can put them in a cool place in your basement and go down there in March, April, and there they sit. They don't molder. So they have great staying power. The pumpkin, winter squash and pumpkin store for months, high in vitamin A and other nutrients. Pumpkin leaves are also edible, although they might be bitter. It's easy to collect seed from squash and pumpkin. Just scrape it out, rinse it, and dry it, and put it in a little Ziploc or a little container, and there you go. All members of this plant species will cross-pollinate. That means summer squash, winter squash, etc. So plant the fields far apart. Otherwise, you get mutants, and they're still edible, but it might not have the qualities that you're seeking. And then how would you ever get it back? In other words, the seed is unreliable. Yeah. The seed should be kept fresh by growing it out periodically so you can save new seed. The Hobbits also featured cities in tidal regions raised on stilts so the tide can come in and out. This is one of their most recent movies, something about, the gloom of Solog, or I can't remember, but it was this delightful little city that allowed the tide to come in and out, and you could go out in your boats and come back and park your boat under the house. And of course, in Asia, this is just absolutely what they do. They have these marshy tidal, swampies or whatever, and they live in up above on stilts. It's so common there. Okay, the city up above in this Hobbit movie has water transport and fishing because they just park the boats underneath. Current day from Asia, I think I've featured that on my website big time because when you see these movies from Vietnam or whatever, you say, oh, well, that's primitive. No, it's highly practical. Who hasn't been charmed by the elven tree houses up in the Lord of the Rings? The stairways go round and around these big trees, up and up, and they're way high above anything on the ground that might be that we would want to avoid. High in the branches, away from whatever might be prowling around on the ground, snakes, bugs, wolf packs. And in the case of the quest, seeking to return the ring to its grave, hordes of orcs, right? You don't want them leaping up. At least if they're coming up the stairs, you can hear them and see them coming. Okay, the Swiss Family Robinson movie also featured a tree house made from their crashed boat, using the boat parts for beams under the floor of the house and boards for the floor. They are not only off the ground for safety, but also safe from a tropical storm with storm surge. In one of their movies, they have a boat prow sticking out, and I'm not sure if it's because there was a remake on more than once on these, and it occurred to me that maybe their boat, ended up in the tree because of the storm, and they just left it there.
No.
Why not? Even the prow was used, hoisted high. After the hurricanes of late, lots of boat parts may be scattered on land in a wreck. That's food for thought. We think, oh, okay, we're going to have big tidal waves during the pole shift that the Zetas have predicted, by the way, But they've been pretty good about meeting predictions, with their plate movements and storms and the wobble and the earth wobble and the like. Big-time tidal waves, that wash, even after hurricanes. You look, and there it is in Main Street, some sailboat on its side.
Right.
Well, if it's really bad enough, just leave it there. Hack off this and that part and live in it. Make your home out of it. The movie The Witness, barn raising without electrical tools or hoists, is wonderfully depicted in the movie The Witness, where Harrison Ford is hiding out at an Amish homestead instead of doing a murder. No, actually, he was doing a murder investigation, but it went awry, and he himself had to hide out. Community spirit, helping each other, is, it's shown, it's quietly emphasized. It's not the theme of the movie. But you can't, if you think about it, there it is. In this barn raising, the whole darn community arrives. They put it out in a day. The women are cooking and putting all the pies out and et cetera, fried chicken or whatever. And there's like 50 to 100 men swarming all over like ants, putting up the structure, raising up the walls. They stick poles at the side and use ropes for, as a lever up over some board up high. And up they go, and they hammer, and they use hand tools, and they have these round wooden pegs instead of nails, with glue them in place. And by the end of the day, it's got its roof on, it's got its siding, and floors are in, and they're all walking away, singing in the dusk to go home. I'm done in a day because of the community spirit, and that's the kind of, not because somebody was paid, and that's what I talk about, the communities that will form even before the pole shift, what the Zetas call service to other, thinking about sharing, communal living, helping each other, that type. Do what you can, find your niche, what your talent is, and that's what they exemplify here. Okay, the Amish do this today. They espouse a simple life without electricity or phones or cars. So what you see in that movie is what they do today. They won't let you go with a filming camera. I tried. They don't like that.
Yeah, they're not fond of that.
No, they refuse. But and horse and carriage, etc. So, which you can see trotting down the road, and if you wanted to take a picture of that, I'm sure you could get away with it. But in this movie, you see the whole thing as they really do it. If you haven't seen that movie, rent it and see it. Waterworld.
Well, I mean, Nancy, though,
yeah.
I mean, in our neck of the woods, we're in southern Wisconsin, and I grew up in Minnesota, and we have plenty of odd Amish and Mennonite, I guess, is another faction. In our areas, because of the farming and the availability of wood, so a lot of the woodworking and furniture building that they do, they sell for in their businesses. But yeah, I mean, we have brutal winters here. I will say that. I mean, I learned to live with it, but it kind of keeps out living in northern, the northern part of the upper Midwest. You learn to survive every winter, and the Amish do it without electricity, without natural gas. They do it with wood and coal, and they live through every winter. I mean, obviously they flourish, and so.
I used to go to one of their bakeries, and they come out, if it's dusk, they come out with an oil-burning lantern.
Yeah, lantern.
And the like. Yeah. It's all just charming, and I just love them. We have them all over the place, too, and they make great neighbors. They're very, I don't know. So I worry about them because when we have the catastrophe and the cities empty out and people... I hope that they don't get inundated, but travel won't be that easy when anybody's lingering in the cities and big earthquakes and flooding and all that kind of thing. They're probably going to have to make houseboats and float because trying to go along the roads, you won't be able to get your car moving. The roads will be ripped up. The gas will all explode and burn, and you'll be on foot. So I'm hoping that the Amish aren't inundated, and they can hold classes if they do. Say, here's how you do it. Hand tools, they do indeed sell furniture, yes, and make it. Beautiful furniture. Who can forget Waterworld, the movie that depicted the Earth so flooded that only the tips of Mount Everest poked out above the waves? And, of course, this is fantasy. In this fantasy scenario, survivors lived on cities made from floating trash often dredged up from sunken cities below the waves, and by eating fish and seaweed and occasional tomato plants. So basically, they're showing, well, all we have is stuff that floats, so we've got to figure out how to fish or, collect, because seaweed is very edible, and kelp and the like, it's nutritious. I mean, it's a delicacy in Japan, or a staple, I should say, for things like sushi, so they show you, and they said, well, a lot of this flooding that will happen after the pole shift is land going, being pushed under the waves, or the rising sea level, because the oceans will heat up for a period of time from all the friction, according to the Zetas, in the opinion of the Zetas. And therefore, you can look down under the waves and say, oh, wait, there was a house there. Look, I see a roof. Well, what's to keep you from swimming down and hauling some of that stuff to the top and making a larger raft and the like? And so in Waterworld, they show virtual little cities, structured, and they're all bobbing and floating away, and, with walkways between them. And it's a lot of hints on what you could do. Of course, these items would be typical of houseboat living, but barter with land-based survival camps would be assumed, in the Earth of the future. So that where somebody might say, well, all right, the city's been flooded, and, what are we going to do? We can't, and you build houseboats, but you can float along and find areas that are above land and say, okay, I've got the fish, you've got the potatoes or whatever, and barter. And that's also what the Zetas predict is in the future, bartering. So you see bartering in Waterworld too. Yeah. A quiet theme in the Star Wars movies is one where a natural leader emerges. Luke Skywalker was just part of a moisture vaporizer family on Tatooine. Yoda lived in a mud hut on his swamp planet. Rey, in the most recent Star Wars The Awakening, was a scavenger left on another Outer Rim planet, gathering electronic trash for her supper. They're all living in poverty. I mean, none of this is opulent. Yet they all became leaders. Finn was an improbable hero in the newest Star Wars movie, The Awakening, as he was snatched from his family as a toddler by the First Order to be trained as a soldier, and knew no other family life. Isolation, indoctrination, that was what he was given. But he emerged as a hero. No wealth or royalty to assist them for any of these people. Yet they followed their hearts and became heroes, natural leaders emerging. The future will have many such leaders emerging. My point is here, people love to watch these movies, and they may identify with these people and say, oh, I would do that if I was in that situation. Well, good for you, because you'll probably get your opportunity. Recycling is another thing that was shown repeatedly. In Star Wars, Watto runs a junk shop on Tatooine. He's getting the heroes back into space with a replacement part for their cruiser. Rey is a scavenger in Star Wars Awakening movies, showing once again that recycling used parts is a hot business in the Outer Rim in the Star Wars series. Rey makes her home in a crashed ship, secure from desert sandstorms. The new Earth will find that car parts, junkyards, and even mining landfills will prove a rich resource for inventive minds. The childhood book on and recycling, big time. I keep saying landfills will end up being, people will go in there and dig looking for metals, because metal won't rot, and then they'll melt it down. And they'll say, okay, it's got a lot of aluminum in there, but it's also got some of this and this and this or whatever. And there you are. Even like carbon arc lamps, which will burn as bright as sunlight. Battery cores, the carbon insert in battery cores is carbon that can be used for these lights. So that valuable stuff is moldering away down there, and I'm sure people will realize that and dig it up. The older the landfill, the more accessible, because you get rid of things that are like, rotten tomatoes or whatever that you don't want to dig through. The childhood book Huckleberry Finn immortalized rafting on the river, fishing and utilizing what nature provides, with a sense of adventure and bathing or doing laundry only when absolutely necessary. When rivers swell during torrential rains or backwash during rising seas, such flexible living is a quick solution, an instant houseboat made of logs and a canvas tent. If Huck and his friends could do it, so can you. And there you are. He didn't put good money down and get a boat. He cobbled it together with what he had at hand. Making rafts. Where Huck Finn had boards and barrels at hand to make his raft, Tom Hanks in the movie Castaway had only what nature provided. Tree limbs and trunks that would float and vines to bind it all together. He did make a lean-to hut out of plastic trash, but large leaves would have worked as well. Think about it. Naked and afraid, that was the Castaway scenario. He had nothing. The movie focused on human loneliness, with Tom Hanks enlisting the soccer ball Wilson as a friend, but inadvertently reminded the public about survival tools. And it's throughout. How to making fire. That was one of the big lessons in that movie. Who can forget Tom Hanks in a primitive dance as he is finally able to make a fire without flint, without matches, and without a lens to focus sunlight, using the time-honored method of twirling a stick rapidly on a bit of dry kindling. For those not familiar with this method, one rubs a stick between the palms to twirl the end against some dry kindling fluffed against a stone or a hard surface. Some methods use a bowstring to do the twirling. Heat from friction is the spark. And this bowstring thing, you can find examples of that on YouTube, on the internet, where you pull the bow back and forth, and as this happens, the string twirls because it's twisted there in the middle.
Yeah, you wrap your drill, what would be the piece of wood, a dowel or a stick at this point. You need something that's relatively straight and whittle it to the point where you've got a decent point to concentrate the pressure. You're taking like a bow from an archery set, but you're just bending a string, bend it to get it into a bow shape, but wrap that rod inside the string. So wrap the string around the rod several times, and then with one hand you hold the rod, and with the other hand you move the bow back and forth. The bow will then twist the rod because there's multiple wraps on. It's hard to explain. Yeah. You'll have a photo, right, on the YouTube video?
Yes, I will. And you can go and get a YouTube. The guy that's considered the master at this technique says he can start a fire in like 3 seconds, and he proves it too. It's just really quick, and zip, 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 and there it is. So he knows what he's doing. But,
what's interesting with the making fire and how I don't know if it's just Sunday nights. Sometimes there's nothing on the television most of the time, but I was watching Weather Channel last night, and there's a survival series on there with, I think it's Creek Stewart that does the SOS survival, the one with the ponytail, Nancy, the blonde hair.
Oh yeah.
He's a survival expert. Anyway, he's showing how to make a old paint can with some alcohol and rolled up toilet paper, make that into a burner, a stove, right? And then to light it, he reaches into his pocket and pulls out his Bic lighter and lights it.
Right.
Just like you would if in the real world situation, you just pull out your lighter. Survival expert.
And you should. These old Bic lighters will be dug up out of the landfills. They will, because those flints, they're not going to go bad.
My point is, Wilson didn't have a Bic lighter for his buddy. I'm just saying, if you're going to practice survival skills, my point is that you would do it with the least amount of tools possible.
That's right. That's right.
And this
and
blowtorch.
If you don't want to watch, yeah, poor and a blowtorch. Poor Tom Hanks. In trying to get this started, he ended up with blisters all over his hands,
right.
and it's depicted again in the primitive movie Quest for Fire, which shows firsthand how important fire was to caveman tribes, and they had fire from when a lightning started a fire in a tree, and it would keep the wolf packs away. They'd all crowd into a cave and have this big fire at the mouth of the cave, and blah blah blah, and it would also warm them up, and they lost it all, and so now they were sitting in trees, in an island in the middle of the river, cold and wet, and so these guys go off and they're looking, because they can't wait for lightning to strike, so off they go, and they encounter another tribe, that knows this technique of twirling the dowel, right? And, of course, love and tribal warfare are featured, as are the predators like the saber-toothed tiger running them up trees. But having fire is the real love story here, and they end up, with an old tribe and the new tribe and the baby on the way and blah, 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 and all this kind of thing. And, but nevertheless, excellent example, because he's astonished. Oh, here we are tromping all over, risking our lives with the saber-toothed tigers, and this is all we had to do. So it goes to show you. Yet another survival technique quietly presented during the Castaway movie was spear fishing and collecting drinking water on a desert island. What was Tom Hanks supposed to do? He can't go shopping for bottled water. He finds collecting rainwater from leaves and drinking coconut milk is the solution. After he gets fire burning, he can cook his crabs and fish, but also simply ate raw fish. So they show him making a spear, which is kind of flayed out at the end and is like a fork, and he walks around, stands on a rock, and then he, spears it and all that kind of thing. So you're reminded about these simple, primitive things that city dwellers certainly don't think about. They think, oh no, I'll have my gun and my bullets. Eating squirrels when game such as deer or turkey are hunted out was immortalized in the Hunger Games. Yet this was standard fare during the Civil War, when starving soldiers in the woods would eat squirrel. That's a fact. Rats are not much different, as squirrels are known as tree rats in many locations. Hunting by bow and arrow is also a central feature throughout the Hunger Games, a weapon that can be fashioned from material at hand, no running out of bullets. Captain Sullenberger, the hero in the movie Sully, had a choice to make. The plane suffered multiple bird strikes and was crippled. He landed on the Hudson River, a decision within his purview, rather than risk going down over land to get to the nearest airport. No lives were lost, in part because the water doused the engine fires, but Sully came under heat from the NTSA for choosing the river landing. Discarding other suggestions, Sully is known for his leadership, a stunning real-life example of leadership. And like I talked about emerging leaders, from the Star Wars series, here's one where he stood up to authority because and it wasn't like he just got a command and didn't listen to it. They were making suggestions. We've cleared this airport over here, and he said, I don't think we're going to make it. He was the captain. He got to make the call. He made a call that was not popular with the people that were telling him what to do, and came under heat for that. But he did the right thing and saved everybody. It's really a tearjerker of a movie, and an absolute true story. The Revenant, and that's a movie that it's hard to watch if you don't like grizzly bears and getting chewed up and dragging around through the woods and broken leg and ay. If leadership is important, so is dogged determination. The movie The Revenant is a true story of such determination. Attacked by a grizzly and left for dead, half buried, Our hero struggles through miles of desolate wilderness with a broken leg and no food or weapons. That's a fact. He eats what nature provides, seeds on various weeds and grasses, and ignores his pain. The will to live is a powerful motive, so he makes it all the way back. For anyone who hasn't seen, he gets attacked by the grizzly, and then the people, that the team that he's hiking through, they leave somebody behind because they're sure he's going to die, and stay with him until he dies and bury him. Well, the guy started to bury him before he was dead, and that type of thing. And he digs his way out, and goes all the way back to a settlement where the person that wronged him is, and has justice prevails. Let's put it that way. Okay, the movie The 33, another true story. It depicts the true story of 33 miners in Chile trapped by a collapse for more than 2 months. They never gave up hope, though the Chile government tried endless rescue attempts with no success. I mean, the country was determined to get them out, and it was, but what a horror! 2 months down, they were way down. The last man out was the one who held the group together when they were feared lost. An elderly man, a shift foreman named Luis Urzula, who enforced tight rations in their limited food and supplies. And he came up last to make sure every one of those people got up and out. As he emerged, he said, "We had strength, we had spirit, we wanted to fight. We wanted to fight for our families, and that was the greatest thing. Determination, will to live, dog determination. Just not, I'm not going to give up, that type of thing." So there we go again. Qualities that are survival, that are really the core of these movies. The movie The San Andreas showed great earthquakes depicted, with highways suddenly erupting into chasms and bridges falling down. Great tsunami waves crash over the Golden Gate Bridge. Travel becomes almost impossible, except by choppers that can land anywhere and dirt bikes that can go off-road. The Zetas have always advised to be in your safe location well ahead of the last weeks. The last weeks, by the way, are depicted by the Zetas 7.3, starting with, it includes 4 days or 3 days of darkness or whatever, 6 days when the world seems to be turned upside down, so the sun seems to rise from the west, then a slowing rotation for 18 days. I mean, they depict it down to the nit, so that you will know when you're in the last weeks. Do not be on the coast at that time. Be up in the hinterlands in your safe locations. And yes, this is all in the opinion of the Zetas, who are highly, highly accurate. So read that. Keep it in the back of your mind, because travel will not be possible during the last week for a lot of reasons. Not just bridges and roadways and that, but you could have blocked roads. You can have people, during Katrina, they had bridges where people were trying to get out of the flooded city, and the wealthy communities would stand on the bridges and say, "You can't come across." They said, "We just want to pass through." No. So you can get all kinds of little territorial games going. So don't wait. The sooner you get to Uncle Bob's farm, where he has chickens and goats and you can garden and have those pumpkins and all this stuff, the sooner the better. The Zetas advise to get into your safe locations for this reason, because travel may be blocked or impossible. The movie 2012 was another one. Not a true story, Fantasia. Showed several valid concepts about the pending passage, and a lot of garbage, a lot of stuff that was not, what the Zetas predict, let's put it that way, or even logical. So disinformation. But there was a lot of things that were what I consider truthful. Yes, in the opinion of the Zetas, we're going to have a crustal shift of 90 degrees, serious, big, and that was shown in 2012. This theory of crustal shifts has been espoused by Hapgood, who wrote a book about it, and he was a friend of Einstein's, and reportedly Einstein said that was the best explanation for wandering poles and ice ages and all that he has ever seen. So he basically said, that makes sense. Accounts for ice ages and, the mammoths up in the Arctic Circle and blah, blah, blah. Was the movie 2012 accurate? No, Mount Everest will not sink below the waves. It'll, come on. It's been bumping up at every time there was any kind of plate movement. That's why it's so high up there. With, by the way, rock that shows seashells. So you can see where that rock started down below the water somewhere and got pushed up and up and up. So Mount Everest is not going to be below the waves. And yes, there are gigantic tidal waves along the coastlines, as was depicted for Washington, D.C., where they show, this huge military ship, about to land on the White House. Big waves and a lot of inundation of water. Yes, Washington, D.C. is actually not that high ground. It's low ground. It was known way back when as the swamp. Yes, the placement of the magnetic poles will change, but in the movie 2012, they have Wisconsin being the new South Pole. Actually, the Zetas predict that the bulge of Brazil will shift up to where the North Pole is now, and India will shift down to where the South Pole is now, and those are the new poles. But in the movie 2012, they say Wisconsin becomes the new South Pole. Yes, India disappears under the waves, not Mount Everest, but India. And yes, LA on the San Andreas is devastated. And yes, Yellowstone will erupt as depicted, but according to the Zetas, it will not be a supervolcano. Because of all the subduction of plates pushing in from the Pacific, there is baffling that has gone on, so that any magma trying to get to the surface has to go back and forth, like a muffler on a car. So by the time it gets to the surface, it's lost a lot of its oomph, and therefore it'll be just kind of like a regular volcano, maybe even an oozer like Hawaii has oozing volcanoes. Okay, 2012 was, however, pretty darn accurate on how they depict the political situation, especially the cover-up over the presence of Nibiru. Now, Nibiru it came into the inner solar system in 2003. We photographed it. We tracked it. According to the Zeta said where to look, and we had teams on 3 different continents looking at it in infrared or going to observatories and tracked it. And people are taking pictures of it all the time, with red filtering for red, or it shows up as a second sun. Wait a minute, didn't the sun already go down? Now it's going down again. That kind of thing. So it's like not a secret, but the closest we get to it is to mutter about, there's some tug out there near Orion. Well, we knew about that in 1983, which is when that Washington Post article appeared, and we, and then they said, oh no, the perturbations, that was all just a math error. And now, we're back talking about what's out there tugging. It's like we've gone back to 1983, and everybody's supposed to forget that we were told, that there was no perturbations of the outer planets, and et cetera.
Right.
So they're having a terrible time admitting to you that Nibiru is going to make a passage. It's in the inner solar system. And yes, there it is, coming at us from the sun. And Nancy Leader and Zeta Talk are correct, and so consequently, 2012 showed the cover-up as a political situation where the elite look out for themselves, right? Somehow, I found this amusing. The satellites in the sky never get ripped out. They have this crustal, and they claim that the whole reason that the crust is shifting is because of the sun has some sort of an emanation that causes everything to get slippery. So the satellites are fine. These boats are chugging along from somewhere, in Tibet down to South Africa or something, and they're reading the satellites, and they're just fine. But, yeah, if you consider that Nibiru has this vast debris-ridden tail that's causing a lot of, fireballs and bolides now, the satellites are going to be good for nothing by the time we get to the pole shift. Shortwave radio is the way to go, by the way. If you're not into it now, get into it, because from tower to tower, it's very durable. It is the emergency frequency used today by the military, by emergency management, police forces, whatever, Have somebody in your group that is a shortwave or ham radio expert. Okay. In the movie 2012, the public is only told the truth at the last minute, when most people have already been dead. I mean, LA is rolling into the sea and huge chasms are opening up, and it says, oh, all right, so now we have the president getting there in front of the TV saying, I have bad news for you. Well, hello, they don't have a house anymore. The jerk left in charge when the president washes out to sea, which he does when this big shipping, boat crashes on the White House. And the vice president, apparently he doesn't make it out because a volcano erupts in Maryland or something like that, this guy says, I'm now in charge, and he's exactly what you don't want in charge, a puffed up politician, And he says, when challenged about when the people are going to be told, he says, when all of us are in a safe place. And they show that the queen comes with her little corgis, and she has a place on the boats. And all of these people are important for the preservation of mankind. But the common man is not to be informed and doesn't count. And that about sums it up. The wealthy people, the politicians in the know, that's what we got going on right now. Thank heavens for USA EBM and Ann and Andrea and I trying to get it out to you, the truth.
Haven't we done an episode on the bunker building of the elite in our past?
Oh, I know we have. We've been doing USA EBN monthly shows for 2 years. The whole list, by the way, you can find it on my website. Well, it's on my YouTube channel. It's also on the USA EBN website, I'm sure. But if you go to my website, immediately where it says New Zeta Talk, it's on the drop-down list there. It says interviews, and that has the whole list for, what are we talking about, 24 or more, hours when we've gone through. And the reason I'm doing movies now and how they depict survival is because we've just about beat to death how to make windmills out of car parts and you can only talk. I mean, we don't want to repeat ourselves, so we're trying to,
No, but I mean, the running theme from a lot of disaster movies, if they know about it, let's say it's a Deep Impact was an asteroid strike.
That's right.
The NASA. Just remember, people out there, listeners, NASA is a military agency. It's part of the government. It's not a privately. It's not. It is a bunch of scientists, but it's not. It's not like a local university. No, they're not independent. They're most of the people that go on space flights are captain or admiral or not admiral, but captain or lieutenant, and they're all part of the either Air Force, Navy, what have you. I mean, they've been part of the system, quote unquote. So and it's fun. Maybe not fun is the right word. It's interesting to watch NASA and the mainstream media try to explain what's going on in the skies. Oh, we have a new neighbor coming into our solar system from another galaxy. Like, excuse me?
Mm-hmm.
And trying to explain away the sightings of the dark twin, which we'll cover later, I hope so. Oh, that's just a lens flare. I mean, a lens flare on 7 continents on an HD camera and each one? Okay. It's just at some point I just want them to come out and go, hey, you know what? We've been lying to you since you were born, and your parents and your grandparents. So, sorry, here's the truth. Here's how to get ready. Go over to
Yeah,
USABN
I,
and listen to Nancy.
yeah, I don't know what I think I can't remember one of my newsletters I talked about where we're likely to go. It's likely that NASA is just going to say, okay, we were told it was national security and keep our mouth shut, because there is no amount of wiggling around that they can do to where they can arrive at what they're looking at now and what they're saying now and what they should be saying. And oh, by the way, here it comes. It's as close to us as Venus. And there it is, writhing away in the skies. You just didn't notice it. There's nothing that they can say. They're going to have to throw up the defense and say, look, Reagan put out a national security thing, and everybody was up, and their underwear was all uptight and bundled because we were told rioting in the streets is the worst, is the greater danger. And then they can point to people who are dead, like Reagan.
Well, I mean, that's what's going to be with 9/11.
Do?
We're not going to find out what happened on 9/11 until everybody's dead.
No.
I mean, come on.
Or JFK, what a joke. We're going to release the papers. Oh, yeah, sure. The CIA and the DOD killed JFK. And what are they going to do? Admit that? No. So going on with movies, various movies such as the movie Twister have been produced focusing on storm chasers or survivors of tornadoes. I guess one could even include The Wizard of Oz in that list. Yes, they go down into their storm shelter, which is, Oklahoma, Kansas, those flat areas out there, they all have those little lift the doors and get down in there and, hold the door shut, because tornadoes will flow over the ground. They don't dig. I guess in some cases they do dig down in the ground, very rarely. They tell you, get out of the car, lay down in a trench at the side of the road, because they go over hills, and they also, dome cities like the monolithic domes are tornado proof because of this hill shape, and the tornado comes up and goes over, and in the main it does that. So this is depicted in these movies, right? And in the movie Twister, they even had cows and cars and getting picked up and thrown, and that does happen. People say, "Oh, there's my car 2 miles down the road." A lot of power in tornadoes, which are pulling the air up in the center. It's from differing air pressures. The top air is dropping, the bottom air is being sucked up to replace that. Getting below the surface of the ground for safety is depicted repeatedly. Thus, the below-ground storm shelters in Kansas farms, holding on to something sturdy so as not to be sucked up into the center of the tornado, is also depicted in the movie Twister, and that is what happens. If you can hold on, you won't go up and up and end up 2 miles away. Another safety maneuver is getting out of the tornado's path by driving across its path rather than trying to outrun it. They show this in the movie. Okay, it's coming straight at us. We're not going to turn around and try to beat it out of town ahead of it. Go at a 90-degree angle and therefore get out of its path altogether. So lessons to be learned in the movie, and maybe you're not following all that or absorbing all that because you're interested in who ends up with who, because there's a romance or 2 or 3 going on, but that's what you're being told. These are these survival techniques. Another one in the movie Hildalgo. This is about a cowboy, of the Old West. I don't think it's a true story, but it might be. It looks like it might be. And someone comes over and says, "Oh, go to Arabia and get in the race because your horse is really fast." That type of thing. Okay. So he takes it up. It's kind of a bet between certain people, and so one princess, Arabian princess, has got her eye on him and gives him a hint about locust swarms, and she said, "They are not a curse; they are a blessing." Right? So we find out what that's going to be. As he and his sturdy pinto are out there, and a sandstorm comes up, and they lay down, and bear through, and afterwards they shake the sand off, and find dead locusts or dead and dying locusts all over the ground, and they eat them. and they get nourished, and they can keep on, and it makes a difference between dying out there in the desert or not. And bugs are extremely nutritious. We keep saying this, and around the world, it's a staple in many countries, or even a delicacy. And they're full of oils, proteins, fats, B vitamins galore. When I did my vitamin episode over a year ago, by the way, that's another good one. Don't miss it if you haven't seen it, and take notes, because if you can get all the vitamins you need from weeds and bugs, and weeds are high in vitamin C, and bugs, the B vitamins, and all kinds of other good stuff. Okay, the message in the movie Towering Inferno is right in your face. High-rise buildings in cities are not safe. Count the ways. The elevators won't work in case of fire. It's a fact. They tell you take the stairs. Oh, we can't take the stairs. The stairway collapsed, because something down below, moved, and now, whoops, all we have is this big chasm, and who has a parachute? Nobody. And you can't jump out the windows. You're way, way up there, and meanwhile the fires are everywhere, right? So that was the message in the Towering Inferno. Basically, don't be in the cities. If the big earthquakes are coming or are happening or have happened, get out of the city. And invariably, earthquakes result in burning cities. And this was true of the 1906 earthquake in San Francisco. Fires everywhere. And they couldn't get the water, to the fires because of the roads were ripped up, etc. And the water pumps weren't working, and even if they're by hand, So, and you can count on a modern city having no water. The water pumps will be broken, and the water mains ruptured. The electricity be gone, so there goes the water pumps, right? So don't be in the cities. That's they're going to be a death trap. But watch. It'll come. Here come the last weeks, and everybody will be sitting in their penthouses up high. We're safe. We're in a penthouse. I can see it now, right? So the Ice Age is Continental Drift was a kids' movie, right? It has a message, and I'm so happy the kids are getting these messages because they see things melting, the land shrinking, right? And then there's competition for food and resources and the like, and they're battling, so kids get the message. Continents pull apart, they do drift. What's continental drift? Oh, that's where Pangea, blah, 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 blah. And you can see Pangea, where South America tucked against Africa, and the like. And it's so obvious that they were all one big land lump at one time, so yeah. They'll pull apart, and these kind of things can happen. A lot of water in places that you don't expect, and so you got to worry about that. And in that movie, being separated from loved ones is a big point. The squirrel keeps losing that precious acorn. He has one acorn. He's always risking his life for the one stupid acorn. But the point is, it's his resources, and they get separated. The elephant troop, gets separated from each other, and then they get back together again, and all that. So, all of this is talking about migration, and The Day After Tomorrow is my last movie that I want to mention. The need to leave one's former life behind and migrate to a better climate is shown in this movie. The Day After Tomorrow, where New York City becomes completely untenable as a place to live, like overnight. And it's an interesting movie, but it doesn't happen that fast, but they show it that way. Like, oh my God, the whole northern hemisphere has become one big ice pack, No, it doesn't happen. Anyway, New York City becomes flooded and bitter cold. and scant warning at all. Migration to a better climate comes late for the few New York City survivors. And of course we have the poor leadership coming from the White House. We have and this guy was obviously supposed to be Dick Cheney, No, I don't buy that story. I'm not sure I buy, And so because he doesn't issue warnings soon enough, half of the U.S. dies in the cold, and a few people straggle over into Mexico, where he's the president, because he has good judgment, and that's another lesson. This is politicians. This is where they're at. Anyway, denial is extremely strong when you're facing cataclysms like this. People say, and the Zetas have given us examples of how bad it can get, and it's there today. People say, I try to tell people about, look what's happening with the hurricanes and the storms, and the sun is way too far north when it rises and all this, and you can't get them to focus on it, or if you get them to focus, they turn away quickly because they just can't. It's too. I can't deal with it. They say that type of thing. And my personal story on that is my second husband, who is still in California. 20 years ago, I came here to Wisconsin, which is going to have a nice climate in the aftertime, according to the Zetas, be like Alabama, not on the coastline and all that. I'm not sure my house will stand up, but, and I said, I can't leave you until I get you to listen to some of this stuff. Here he is with his 154 IQ, right? Explain to me how come the mammoths, the woolly mammoths, died out on Wrangel Island up there in the Arctic if we are not having crustal shifts, blah, 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 So finally he says, I know it's true, but it makes my tummy hurt to think about it, so I don't want to think about it. And if you don't shut up, I'm going to drive off the road, and this is a true story. That's denial, right? So that was, the vice president in the day after tomorrow who ends up being in charge down there in Mexico, right? So that's the end of my talk about what the movies can teach you. And I hope you, if you didn't take notes, you come back and listen to it again tomorrow. It'll be on my YouTube channel. Andre always has it up there on the USA EBM as a iPod, etc. And listen again, take notes, rent some of these movies, and look for the survival tips. So we're just about out of time, aren't we?
A little, yeah. We got a couple of minutes left in the feed. I want to thank you for bringing that all together. One of the comments from the chat room. I don't know, Nancy, if you've ever seen the Nicolas Cage movie Knowing. It's about contact and I believe it's a gamma ray burst.
Yes,
the government
that's another excellent movie. Yep.
The government doesn't tell the truth in that one either.
No, they don't. And children are contactees, and they are saved, and taken to another planet, because the Earth is going to. That it's a wipeout from the sun again, but it shows contact and awareness of contact, and how oftentimes that's so subconscious that people think they're insane, and which is one reason that it is done in the subconscious, not the consciousness, because if it was all conscious, people would say, oh man, did I have a trip on a spaceship, and boy, my visitor was really weird looking and was a greasy toad, and rah, 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 rah. And then somebody would shoot them because they're threatening. They don't, and this actually happens on worlds where, they're becoming galactically aware, not just caveman and our primitive societies, but guess what? There's a big unit, lots of intelligent creatures out there, and for that kind of a panic, where the people that are first approached or first welcoming the visitors are considered the enemy somehow. You're talking to demons and killed, and So everything's in your subconscious. Didn't used to be that way in some of the older books like the Bible or the Vedas, in India and the like. And they depict aliens, and those are accurate depictions. But since 1947 or so, according to the Zetas, it's all been recorded in your subconscious because now over half the populace of the world is now in a contactee status, chatting away with various kinds of aliens, and they know the truth. Even if your politicians are not going along with any of that. So
right.
the truth is out that way, direct from aliens to people. That's what the Zetas have said. That's going on. By the way,
And what's that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, most listeners to this broadcast, if you are listening to a broadcast like this where you're listening to Zeta Talk or Research Zeta Talk or Pulse Shift or any of those things have popped into your conscious being, you're probably a contactee.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
Congratulations.
Right. Yeah.
What were you going to say, Nancy?
I was going to just say, the Black Death in the Middle Ages in Europe, in which, I don't know, the argument is 50 to 1 million or 100 million people, just a huge, most of Europe or half of Europe or whatever just died off. And they didn't, in those days, they didn't understand germs. They didn't understand how it was spread. It was just, people dying like the plague. Well, it's back. And it never went away. Way back when it came from Mongolia to China and then migrated in the trade routes, rats on ships to Europe and this and that. But Europe was very overcrowded, and it's carried by fleas. Fleas can get the plague bacteria, and they don't die from it. They don't get sick from it, and they just have it in their tummy or wherever. So when they bite, there it is. Now you get it. So fleas are a terrible plague. It's just like the Lyme disease passed around by ticks and everything that is carried by mosquitoes. They don't die from this virus or bacteria that they carry, but they give it to people. So because of all the rains we've had, and this was a Zeta prediction from 20 years ago talking about all the Earth changes, the increased wobble and the climate irregularities and are going to cause increasing illness because of opportunistic germs and bugs and insects and whatever migrates. And critters do. They go up and down the coastline, various fish kinds of things. And so over there in Madagascar, they had an explosion of the plague, and it's spread over to the coastline of Africa, and they're struggling like crazy trying to keep the flea population and the rats and killing them all, and that's where it comes from. So just a heads up, it's important to worry about flea infestations and things like that. Lots of ways to keep that down. Natural and various pesticides, but what an awful thought. Even in Arizona, they had an outbreak because in the prairie dogs, they were found dead, and they died of the plague. So, and then of course the CDC swoops in and does whatever, but. Increasing illness from opportunistic germs and critters is another thing to worry about, as though you didn't have enough.
All right. Well, I want to give a mention to your website, zetatalk.com. If you want to look up, as a listener, if you want to look up the information on the last week's, it's broken down to the number of days of which the last week's before pole shift is what we're talking about. That's on zetatalk.com. If you get to the website, there's a menu bar at the top. You can just look on those drop downs. And if you want to find more information about our episodes, that's under, which tab is that under? Is it Zeta Talk in the media? No, interviews on the website, right?
Yeah, interviews, right. And that will point to my YouTube channel, but But and I think it's in my media page. That's all the new Zeta Talk. It's the very first drop down on the left. New Zeta Talk, and down there, media page will take you right to USA EBN. Yes.
Excellent. Well, thanks for your time, Nancy. We didn't get to cover the November 4th situation that didn't really happen, which is fine because nothing really happened.
Antifa was going to plan on nationwide riots, but it was a complete dud. But that's all political. The politics is not where it's at. That's really distraction.
No. That's right.
So what we talked about is the real thing. Build a treehouse out of your boat parts. There you go, and have fun watching that movie.
Exactly.
Thank you, Andre.
Thanks, Nancy, for your time.
Yeah.
That's all the time we have for the Zeta Report. The Zeta Report you can view on YouTube, the Nancy Leader channel on YouTube, the Tuesday following the show. So we air the USA EBN podcast on the first Mondays every month, and then it's on the Nancy Leader YouTube channel the day after. If you want to check out zetatalk.com or poleshift.ning.com or usaebn.org. Stay safe, everybody.